Series of author interviews is brought to you by Leisure Press and the Book Reality Experience, turning writers' dreams into book realities.
All right, so welcome everyone to another Book Realities podcast. Today we have the wonderful Angela Cairns joining us. She is a physiotherapist, an acupuncturist, an author, a researcher, so many things that she'll tell us about. So welcome, Angela. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, I've just given them a little bit of a taste of everything, but why don't you introduce yourself to us, tell us everything that you do and where you're from and all these things.
Okay, well, I'm from the UK, and at the moment I'm based in Essex, which is about an hour outside London. My original training was as a physiotherapist. I'm also an acupuncturist, and I have a strong leaning towards integrated therapies, holistic approach to treatment, and I also do quite a lot of coaching, both in the wellness front and helping develop a positive mindset for people. And that includes, I work a lot with creatives in developing a very positive mindset and enhancing their creativity. So that's my real passion, to enhance people's wellness and give them that sense that they can look at life's issues as challenges that are exciting and that they can creatively change, as opposed to threats that are going to limit them and hold them in place. So that's
Amazing.
what I love doing. And about 6-7 years ago now, I'd thought for a long time that I would like to write. And I've done a lot of non-fiction writing around my profession. And I also created a set of relaxation stories that were beautifully set to soundtracks by a composer friend of mine. And I just really wanted to carry on with that creative writing. I loved that creative writing. And what really pushed me to get on with it was that a young friend of mine developed a very aggressive brain tumor and died. And it just really brought home to me that we don't know how much time we have, and that just need to get on with things. And once I'd committed, I'd started writing some short stories, and I was very lucky because a couple of them got accepted into Yours magazine. And once I'd committed to the process, it's amazing what turns up, isn't it? I think it's the law of attraction. A friend said to me, oh, hey, I've seen a really interesting creative writing course, and it was local, and it was on a day that I could attend. And that's really where the novel writing started. And I tend to write women's fiction because what I like writing about is the role of women in society, particularly at times when social or political or economic changes are occurring. And so my first series was set in Essex, because again, I love the Essex countryside. Has a kind of subtle beauty that's often overlooked. And there's a lot on television about the metropolitan side of Essex.
Yes, I was going to say, when I think of Essex, I have this kind of
the only way is Essex
idea.
White stilettos and fairly brash, very image conscious kind of image that we have. But there's a whole part of Essex that's beautiful, that's rural, it's very gentle. There are 2 major estuaries here, so we go out into the sea. And I really wanted to write that side of Essex. So my books are written, my contemporary books are written in the late 80s going through to the 90s, when we had Margaret Thatcher was in politics. She was one of the first women leaders, and so it was a time when the glass ceiling was changing for women, and
this is your Ellie Rose series, correct? The Ellie
yeah,
Rose
that's the
series
Ellie
written in,
Rose series,
Mm-hmm.
and basically I wanted to write about the dilemmas that brought for women, because a lot of women were following careers, but they were also looking at married life and families, and how were they going to juggle it all and move it all. So it was a really interesting time for the role of women in society. And then my historical novel that's just come out, which
Yes.
I got my
Which we're here for.
Song for
Yes.
Kitty,
Yes.
and that's set in Edwardian times, and it's just set pre the First World War, which was when the suffragette movement was in full swing, and it was a massive time of political disruption moving towards and social disruption moving towards the First World War. And again, really interesting to look at the role of women in that society. So the book looks at the role of several women from different generations, and what happens to them during that time. But I guess I was inspired. My grandmother was born in 1896, so she was a teenager at that time. And so I took some of her archives. She lived till she was 106, so I knew her well and spoke to her a lot. So I took some of the conversations we'd had about her life at that time, some of the family archives from that time, not to tell the story of the family. It's not her story, but it is definitely, she helped to place me in that time authentically.
Yeah. And I wonder, I think when I was reading it, it's such a beautiful like interweaving between fact and fiction. And so I guess my two questions would be like, one, was this kind of the book that you deep down knew you always wanted to write, and the Ellie Rose series was sort of your way of getting there? And my other question would be, like, what helped you make that decision to have it be a fictional reimagining of a real story? Was there a reason you didn't want to write, I guess, a sort of memoir on behalf of your grandmother? Or
yeah. Yeah, so I definitely think the Ellie Rose series is talks a lot about, because my main character in that is a physiotherapist. So I'm writing about a world that I know, which is about wellness. And there are a lot of cameo characters in that series, which they teach the main character, Ellie Rose, they teach her as much as she teaches them, and they all help her through her journey. And it starts with a bereavement journey, and then it moves on through her life and through the different challenges that she and her friendship group face. So it's about found family, it's about wellness, it's about resilience and moving forward. So I had a lot of things that I wanted to write about there that were really personal to me and to the work I'm passionate about. The Song for Kitty, I love delving back into historical times. I particularly love that Edwardian era, the end of the Edwardian era. I think the fashions were amazing. As I say, it was a really changing time for women, where they started to take up freedoms, and it started to be actually acceptable for them to work. And whereas previously, really, they only been able to work in service, whereas they were taking up roles as administrators and secretaries and writers, and some were running their own businesses. And so it was a really, really exciting time, and I like the vibe of that time. As I say, I love the fashions, and because it's fascinating politically, because we're leading right up to the First World War, so all the political maneuvering that was going on at that time, and the suffragette movement, absolutely fascinating. So I've based it around the world of music hall, in order to tell the story. I suppose to answer your question about why not an actual memoir, because I really believe that storytelling can touch people's hearts. And yes, memoir can as well, but you're constrained into a narrow area of sort of one person's life and their view. Whereas I think when you're weaving a story, you can bring all sorts of concepts in. You can have side characters that come in and influence the main agenda. You know, you can have goodies and baddies, and you can take your revenge on the baddies. And so it's fun and it's exciting. But I think if you're writing historical fiction, if it's going to feel authentic, it requires a huge amount of historical research. So the research has to be done to give it an authentic flavor. But there's so much material to write there. And I think it's a period where people are a little bit familiar with it because there's been a reasonable amount of literature. E.M. Forster, for example, a lot of his books have been televised as drama series like Howard's End. And
this is what I was going to ask, if you had some inspiration from the kind of available literature in your research process.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, Downton Abbey has been a smash hit worldwide. Now, that was obviously set in a sort of an aristocratic upstairs, downstairs kind of setting, which is not exactly how mine's set. But the characters in that went through some of the dilemmas that I'm writing about. And there's a fantastic author who writes non-fiction about that particular time. Her name's Juliet Nicholson, and she writes, it is non-fiction, but it's almost written as if it's fiction. It's beautifully written. It's not dry at all. And I think her books inspired me to want to tell the story of this time, particularly. And then we have a small, it wasn't a stately home, actually. It was a sort of a manor type house that's passed through generations of people, but not familial generations. It's moved from owner to owner in our area called Highlands House. And it had an absolutely fascinating parallel. I found out after writing A Song for Kitty, it had a fascinating parallel to A Song for Kitty, because the owner of the house at the time that A Song for Kitty's placed, sort of 1910 to 1913, he married an actress. And so it was really interesting for me then subsequently to see the tie-in that there was to one of the local houses. And I'm going to do some talks in there that pull the two books together and look at that period of time for women and what they did. And because the lady May Monroe, who married the actress, she married, but she didn't settle to a life of leisure. She used her talents to do community concerts and raise money for charity and so on. So she carried on being a very proactive person. She didn't just marry and settle to a life. And actually she ran a hospital during World War I in the ground floor of the house as well. So, there are some remarkable women who are just have that appetite and suddenly have the ability to take up their role.
And I was going to say, one of my favorite things about Song for Kitty was, this humanness of the characters. They're very relatable. And I think this is a beautiful way to learn about history in a fictional way, because you can really get on this like relatable level. But did you then, while you were writing, did you have this experience where all of a sudden you saw not sequels, but more books coming from further development of maybe smaller characters? Because one of the characters I really loved was Lily's boss I know it's a really supporting small character, but it's this like really like, I don't know, you see like a spark that there's a possibility for something more later, or did you start another book?
Yeah, I have two more coming in this same era. They're already penned out. I've started writing. And I want to keep the notion of a song for. And so I'm going to write a song for May, which is May Monroe, and I'm going to look at her life. She had an amazing life. I probably won't, she's a real life character. She will be, as in a song for Kitty, Kitty Marion is the real life character, and Kitty was a suffragette activist. But it's told through the voice of Lily, who is a young apprentice seamstress. And it's Lily's story that we're telling, but Kitty has an amazing influence on that. So I want to tell May Monroe's story, but I'll probably tell it through the eyes of perhaps her dresser or somebody that works in the house at that time. Because I think, again, that's very relatable. It's very easy to write about a celebrity or a lady or a lord, but actually, if you can look at their life through the lens of someone who knows them, you can make it more relatable to a lot more people. Yeah. And then the second one, so Lily's mentor, she's an apprentice dressmaker. So her mentor, who works with her and who teaches her all her skills, she is outside of her day job, which she earns her sort of daily bread as a seamstress to the upper middle classes and so on. She designs quite avant-garde theatre costumes, and she doesn't really initially think they're ever going to go anywhere. They're just her dream, and her portfolio is there. But with them, as their story moves on and as they move on together, it's the time when Coco Chanel was actually beginning to design in Paris. So my third one is going to be a song for Gabrielle, who's Gabrielle Chanel. And I'm going to have them meet her, and I'm going to, and through their connection to Kitty Marion as well, so that they have a connection to the stage. I'm going to actually take her story, Annis Laidlaw's story, forward, and I'm going to have her meet. So my character there, my main real life character, will be Gabrielle Chanel, and I'm going to tell her story, but through the development of the life of Annis Laidlaw, who's the mentor of Lily.
And would you, I mean, something that comes to mind, because, there's of course a way that you can describe costume and visuals through words, but I just envision a play or a screenplay or a film or a TV. Would you ever have this kind of hope or goal?
Oh, I'd love to. How exciting. I mean, last week for the event at Highlands House, a colleague who's coming to help me at Highlands House, because I'll be speaking, but we'll have a book table there as well. We went off to a theatrical costumier and we chose our Edwardian dresses, and they're just amazing. And both of us had the best afternoon trying on these costumes, and we both came away feeling that the physicality of wearing those dresses gave us a real insight into how the women would have moved and how they would have used those dresses, and perhaps the confidence it gave them to be wearing the styles that they were wearing, and how the changing styles from the late Victorian through Edwardian, how it gave them some of the freedoms that they had to actually be wearing different clothes. Yeah. So
I love this. I love this highlight of the importance of fashion. It's not just frivolous. It's like something that really propelled women forward in society and in their lives. And
yes.
Yeah, I love this.
And this was definitely a stated aim of Coco Chanel. Her dresses were designed, yes, to be fashionable, but they were designed to give women freedom, and freedom to express themselves, and freedom to move and be able to do things, which, if you go back to the late Victorian era, I mean, they had huge skirts, hooped skirts, and they were heavily corseted. So, they couldn't get their breath for a start to do a lot of physical things. So, Gabrielle Chanel, when she started designing the loose-waisted dresses and shorter dresses and so on, and of course that takes us into the 1920s, where women are wearing 3/4 length dresses, but they're also wearing divided skirts so that they can actually run and they can play sport and so on. So
take control.
It's a really fascinating journey. And my grandmother was a seamstress, so a lot of what she spoke to me about, and her life really revolved around making dresses, but also embroidery. She beaded evening dresses, was one of the things that she did, and wedding dresses and so on, and the artistry that was involved in that, the creativity that was involved in that. She was a quilter. She crocheted lace, phenomenal skills that she had. So I'm really enjoying pulling that in, because I kind of grew up with that as normal, but it wasn't until I was older that I realized what phenomenal artistry and talent was involved in what she produced.
And I think as we kind of are in this age of fast fashion, and it's like when you find these skills still being practiced, you now realize how incredible it is to have an item that's been hand beaded or like hand sewn, and it's you can't replace that with any kind of
no. I mean, I have a lot of my grandmother's work, and I have some of her crocheted lace, and she was terribly blasé about it, because I've got a couple of beautiful items that are white work. So it's white embroidery on white cloth with drawn thread work to create sort of open work patterns in the fabric, with lace edging, and I was delighted to have them. And I said, golly, I'm going to be scared to use these. And she looked at me and she said, no, you don't need to worry about that. It's all cotton. Stick it in she used to have a copper, not a washing machine. Stick it in the copper on boil wash with some soda. That'll be absolutely fine. And she was so,
it's durable. It's made to be used and made to be durable and quality that lasts.
So and it was beautiful. It was stunning.
And did she teach you also? Do you know how to sew or embroider, or did you grow up learning these skills also?
Yeah, she did. She tried. I have to say it's not my forte. I can do quite a lot of stuff. I can crochet, and she taught me to dressmake and so on. But my heart's not in it in the way that hers is. I cook. I'm quite a creative cook, and I would say, and I write, obviously. I would say they're my creative fortes. She was very musical. My brother's a professional musician, so music runs through the family. And again, I can play and I can sing, but I'm not talented in the way they were. They aren't my talent. So I have to say, to my very great shame, I have my eldest son is 30 now, and I have a pair of age 3 months rompers in my sewing basket that need a button. and I keep them there partly to I don't know, but partly just to reaffirm to myself, what, that's not my talent. I don't have to go there.
It's like this assumption in the past that this was just like a woman's skill, but it's just a normal talent, like anything. Anyone can be good or not good at it. And so I want to kind of take it now to your writing practice and your process. How do you, I guess, working for yourself essentially in clinic, and how do you kind of divide your day, or when you're in a book writing process and you give yourself a deadline, how do you take us through like a day in your life of work, how you would divide the day if there is a
so I think it's really important to be right in the moment wherever you are. So if I'm working in the clinic, I'm absolutely there, present in the clinic. When I started off, I literally only had a Wednesday afternoon to write. So I put it in my diary. If somebody asked me to do something else, I could honestly say, no, I'm sorry, I have another appointment that afternoon. and that was my writing time. I thought a lot about the writing. I contemplated it. I planned and so on. When I was walking the dogs, I used to plan, or I'd flesh out characters and so on. Sometimes I'd dictate those thoughts, so that when I sat down on a Wednesday afternoon, I was ready and I wrote. So I think there's a sort of a notion that, oh, you write when the muse takes you, but actually, if you have limited time, you can actually give yourself a framework and make yourself write. Now, what I do always before I start writing is I ground myself into the session with some breathing exercises, with a deliberate focus into the right-hand side of my brain, the creative side of my brain. And you access that pathway to the creative side of your brain via your senses. So touch, taste, smell, etc. And there are some really simple exercises that you can do. For example, really little simple thing to circuit break the kind of chatter of the general world and take yourself to your creative side. Just thumb and forefinger together, focus your attention, just move them gently across each other with such focus and attention until you can feel the skin ridges there. And thoughts will intrude, but you just gently put those aside. You're not failing. Brains work all the time. So you just put them aside and you take yourself back to the physical sensation of that movement until you can just feel those skin ridges there between the thumb and first finger. You can close your eyes if you need to. That grounds you, takes you out of the chatter, and then it allows you to consciously make the decision to start to work in a creative way. And creative thinking is very different. Left side brain thinking is involved with survival and managing stress and surviving. Creative thinking is about thriving. So you need to develop an empathy and a compassion both for yourself and for the characters that you're writing. So make yourself comfortable, hydrate properly, have a light, nutritious meal, make sure your lighting's good, and set yourself up properly at your computer so that you're comfortable. And then I love things like these. These are on my windowsill. I love something to touch as well. Look, I have crystals, and if you know anything about crystals, different crystals have different meanings. And for example,
but it's always really about intention, isn't it? They just help you clarify that intention. And beautiful.
Yellow is a concentration color, so having something yellow around you. Citrus smells are uplifting, so maybe have lemony or orangey smells that help you. And if you've got little objects like that, you can create your workspace anywhere. So you can have a little bottle of lemon oil or bergamot oil or whatever that you can just have a quick sniff, or have some on a handkerchief, have a few crystals. You can set yourself up anywhere. You can set your writing space up. Once you know your triggers, you can set your writing space up on a train, or you can set your writing space up in, someone else's. But have that compassion towards yourself to make sure that you're well nourished, well hydrated, comfortable, and then use your triggers to get to that right hand side of your brain, and away you go. So it's about having a framework. Yeah.
And I also feel when you are, and I love that you say that, because I think people have this idea that creativity is just this like free, random woo-woo thing, but it's like, this rigor and this discipline, whatever that means for the individual, is so important.
Yeah.
But I feel like when you get into that meditative state, do you feel like it's almost like you're just a vessel for these characters moving through you or something? Like it just comes through you and you're just the conduit for all these stories. And
look, characters talk to you, and they're like real people. They're awkward. You may actually have an idea about where this character's going, and as you're writing, you'll definitely sense the character going, no, I'm not going to do that, or I don't think I would have said that. They definitely they inhabit your being, and it can be really interesting as well to really be in touch with the physicality of your character. So it's great sometimes to get up and go and move. And okay, so you imagine what your physicality is, but then go and really immerse yourself, go and have a look, go and people spot. How does an older person move? You know, what are the detail of their movement compared to a younger person? What are their facial expressions like? And really get into the physicality of your character. So we have to be observational, and you know, it's really good for us to get up and get away from the keyboard and go and get in touch with our senses and our observation. And if you can't write, just change where you're writing. Get up, take your laptop to the library or take it to a local coffee shop and settle yourself somewhere different. You know, you have your triggers, but you don't have to be anal about your routine.
Because there's always going to be, like, if you wanted to, you could make an excuse all the time because there's always something that's not quite right. And I find that, yeah, that's what probably is the biggest roadblock for so many writers, is they just give in to that. I'd love to talk about your experience with all different kinds of publishing avenues, because I guess the thing with independent publishing is you don't have this strict deadline. So I guess you have to really be quite self-led in that way, to give yourself deadlines, to give editorial deadlines. So I'd love to hear your experiences about your different ways that you've published in the past and why you chose them and things like this.
Yeah, well, I started off just assuming that I would traditionally publish, and I was very lucky. I very quickly got an agent, and she gave me some pretty strict deadlines for having follow-up books, which I wrote to. And then actually it all just ground to a halt. And having given me really strict deadlines, she herself then didn't read them for 9 months and nothing happened. And, you know, it was all going to be jammed tomorrow. And I just thought, again, all tied up with losing my friend, I thought, you know what, I was 60 when I really started writing seriously. And I thought, you know what, I don't really have time for this. So I started to look and I started to think, you know what, you run 2 businesses, you have some transferable skills here. And I set about going on courses. And one of the things about writing is you can write the best book in the world, but if you're not actually engaging with your readers so that the book gets in front of the people who are going to love it, no one is ever going to read it. So it's really important not just to love the writing and to love your characters, but to engage and grow to love the marketing side of things, the presentation of your books to people, the getting out there talking to people. And that can be quite difficult for some writers, actually. And I think because they can feel quite introverted, they like the writing process, but they don't like the getting out there process. But unless you're very wealthy, you're going to have to engage with that. And in any case, people want to speak to you and they want to hear about you as the author. So I think you have to fall in love, not just with the writing and not just with your book, but you have to fall in love with the whole process of marketing and sales. And that involves upskilling and learning, because some of the platforms are quite tricky. But you can always delegate. And there are lots of skills involved in producing a book. I mean, if it takes a village to raise a child, it takes half an army to produce a book, because you need copywriters and proofreaders and developmental editors and cover designers and so on. And some of those things you may be able to do yourself. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, we're going to have to do them. So I went the self-publishing route for the Ellie Rose series. I learned all that stuff. And then at the end, there are 4 books. There's a prequel and 3 books in that series. And at the end, I thought, yeah, do you know what? Okay, I've done it. But I would actually like a team who can help me with some of these things. I know I can do it myself, but I'd like a team. So that's when I started looking at independent publishers, smaller publishing houses where I could have a direct relationship with them. I met Ian at the London Book Fair. He was speaking on a panel there, and it turned out that I didn't realise, but it turned out that he was also running an indie book fair that I was part of. And so when I introduced myself, he realized that I was one of the authors that was coming to the Indie Book Fair, and we got chatting, and I thought, yeah, now this is a team that I can work with. And so it becomes a shared independent venture.
And there's something about, like, even though we can do all these things, there's something about outsourcing and letting go to someone you trust and just like focusing all your energies on the creative side. It's such a privilege and an indulgence, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Ian's so great at just like taking all that off your hands and just getting it done so you can really focus on your gift.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love the marketing side, but I find the detail difficult. I'm mildly dyslexic, ADHD. So I find that attending to those very fine details, you know, the proofreading and so on, I find it very difficult. And even, you know, with the help of computer programs and so on, I still find it difficult. So,
and never ending.
It's hugely time consuming. So I definitely think it's important to have a street team around you so that all of you make up the whole. You know, you don't have to be the whole thing yourself if you don't want to be. I mean, if you want to be, then fine. But if you don't want to be, it's important to, you know, doing it yourself doesn't mean doing it alone. It means knowing who and when to ask for help. And that's, you know, just drowning and getting overwhelmed is not great for anybody. And we need to understand our scope and where our strengths are, and then bring people in who can bolster our less strong points.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I fully agree. I can't wait to read more about Chanel and the costumes, and I'm so excited about the follow-ups. But I'd love to kind of start to wrap up the interview with a couple of like what are they called? Quick fire questions. So these are just so if you're willing and ready,
I am.
There's no right answer, just to kind of get an idea of So what is your favorite book, if you had to pick one?
Oh, well, tricky. Are you going to let me have two? Can I have a non-fiction and a fiction?
You can have two.
Okay. So fiction, I absolutely love the Joanne Harris's series of Chocolat. It starts with Chocolat. People will probably know that from the film as well, and it moves on through. She writes, I lived in France for 6 years, and she writes France like no one else. She can transport me back to France. And I love the fact that she adds a little bit of magic in, a little bit of magical realism into her stories. So I love her books from a fiction point of view. From a non-fiction, one of my favorite books is written by Khalil Gibran, and it's called The Poet. And it is just an amazing spiritual book that is full of wisdom for life, and I can go back into it. I've owned about 8 copies. I've lent 7 of them, and they've never come back. So
that's kind of how it goes with these books. They make their way around and to whoever needs them in the moment.
And I'm delighted to buy another copy and have it to lend to somebody. For me, it's an amazing treasury of how to live life and how to look at life in a philosophical way.
Nice. Do you have maybe a least favorite book or genre or something that you just don't connect with?
I've been reading, because I am an advanced reader for a number of other authors, and I just don't really do horror. So I don't accept those, because I'm not really going to be able to it doesn't chime with me. I'm not a horror person.
I'm with you. Are you a summer or a winter?
Oh, now do you know what? I'm going to go in the middle. My psychometric testing has me half and half logical and intuitive creative. So I'm going to go autumn and spring for me.
The in-betweens, I agree. They're the best. Okay, so you have a completely free day, no obligations. What's your perfect free day? How do you spend it?
Okay, so I've got 2 Gordon Setter dogs who absolutely love running free over fields and countryside. So I'm going to choose a not too vigorous walk, a little bit of hill walking or just walking trails. And I'm going to get away from it all. I'm going to breathe the air. I'm going to have joy in watching my dogs running and scenting. I'm going to walk, and I'm going to walk probably 5 to 8 miles, and then I'm going to finish it by meeting some good friends in a country pub and having a nice meal.
That sounds amazing, and probably getting lots of inspiration on all those walks.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing if it's between mountains or oceans, you're more of a mountains kind of person?
I'm not a mountains person. I'm a hills person. I love rolling hills. But there's nothing more invigorating than walking beside a stormy west coast ocean with breakers coming into rocky bays.
That is a good image. Do you have a favorite movie?
Oh, one of my favorite. I love a rom-com. So, you know, along the lines of Four Weddings and a Funeral and Notting Hill and How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. They're all favorites, but probably my absolute favorite is Out of Africa. I think the cinematography is beautiful, the love stories inspirational, the characters are fabulous. So yeah, Out of Africa probably.
And what about a song? If you had to listen to something for the rest of time, do you have something that comes to mind?
Yep. Okay, gosh, that's a tricky one because music's so attached to mood. But there's a song that's sung by Barbara Streisand that comes from the movie Yentl, and it's called Where Is It Written? And it's about a woman who's struggling to find a place in quite a repressed society, and actually what she does is she impersonates a boy, a man, and she goes through a classical education impersonating that, and she's asking in the song, like, why would you settle for just a piece of sky when the whole sky's out there? And I just think, you know, it's incredible. And she says, you know, why would you have wings if you aren't supposed to fly? Why would you have an imagination if you can't let it soar? And the words are fabulous and inspirational. Yeah,
there's something so powerful about lyrics, isn't there, as a writing mechanism? Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much. We can wrap it up there. Thank you. You're very inspiring and brilliant. And if people want to follow your work, what's the best way to see what you're up to, see where you are? Can you give us where we can find you?
Yeah, sure. You can find me on my author website, which is www.angelacairnsauthor.co.uk. And if you'd like to, there are some short stories up there that you can have. There are also, if you'd like to sign up to my newsletter there, you'll get the prequel novella to the Ellie Rose series free.
Oh, amazing.
Nice. And it'll give you a little flavour of some of the writing. And also you can sign up to my my newsletter. If you sign up, you get all the latest, Jen. What am I up to? What am I doing? What am I thinking? What am I reading? So come and join. And I'm on social media on Facebook and Instagram as Angela Cairns Author as well.
Beautiful. So we'll add all those into the notes. Thank you so much again. It's been amazing talking to you, and we can't wait to see what you and all your characters get up to in the not so far away future.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Okay. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Hi, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more readings and author interviews. And don't forget to hit that button to be notified every time we post new content.
If you're an independent author and you'd like to be a guest on our podcast and YouTube channels, simply email guest@bookreality.com or visit our website at bookreality.com and have a look at our podcast page.